أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وآله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل Muhammad. Welcome, brothers and sisters, to another session of Shia Imamiyyah Doctrine. I think this is our 32nd session that we're having. I'm going to try my best to finish Imamat today. There's a chance that we won't. Very quickly, let's go over what we covered last week. Last week we started with article number 90 of the book of Doctrines of Shia Islam, and in that book, in that article, what was discussed was the fact that the appointment of a successor is something that the ensuing Khalifahs after the Holy Prophet understood. It was something that was in the back of everyone's mind, that look, if a leader is going to pass away and is going to leave this dunya, they have to appoint a successor after them. They're not going to leave it to the people. So what happens is you find that after the first Khalifa, this rule is understood, that look, you have to appoint someone yourself. And so he appoints the second Khalifa, Umar ibn al-Khattab. So Abu Bakr appoints Umar ibn al-Khattab. When Umar ibn al-Khattab is passing away, same thing again. It's something that people understood. It's something that grand companions of the Prophet understood. So what do? They sent messages to Umar ibn al-Khattab that, hey, make sure you appoint somebody. Don't leave the people without a shepherd. This is something that Aisha, the history tells us, she sent a message to him that he should appoint somebody after him. We also have that his son Abdullah bin Umar also approached his father and told him in his final maybe days or weeks or whatever it was before he passed away, that you need to appoint somebody after yourself. Don't leave the people without a guide. So what Ayatollah Subhani here is trying to say is that, look, this is something that is understood by the grand companions of the Holy Prophet. Of course, Uthman never got a chance to appoint someone. He was assassinated. Ali ibn Abi Talib, he also, of course, it's obvious that he wanted Imam al-Hasan to be the one to succeed him. So this is something that they all understand. That's one point that he makes, Ayatollah Subhani, in article number 90. Now, the way each of them appoints somebody is different. Like Umar ibn al-Khattab, when he appointed somebody after him, he did it kind of indirectly and through a council of 6 of the grand companions of the Prophet. He said, you people, what you need to do is choose someone amongst yourselves to be my successor. And that's what they did. So one person was chosen, and that was Uthman. Alright, so that's article number 90. Article number 91 is very important because it goes into the responsibilities of an Imam. Responsibilities of an Imam are as follows. He says, although not limited to these. There's about 6 or 7 that he brings in the book. Number 1, explaining the meanings of the Holy Quran. Number 2, because there's verses that sometimes are not understood properly. Number 2, explaining the rulings of the Sharia. Lots of things come up after the Holy Prophet that were not there during the Prophet's time. How do we know what the ruling is? How do we know what Islam wants from us regarding those issues? Answer, there has to be an Imam that you ask them from. The avoidance of divisiveness, the Prophet would get in the way of any made-up, fake, false cults, religions, gods, prophets, whatever. And so this is something that a person who comes after him also has to get in the way of. And for that, to repel darkness, you have to have light yourself to be able to do that. Number 4, responding to all religious and theological questions. Number 5, training his followers by means of his speech and his actions. 6, establishing justice. 7, protection of the frontiers and the lands of Islam against its enemies. So he lists 7 roles and responsibilities. He says it's not limited to these, but these are some of the main ones that an Imam has. Then he concluded from all of this that, look, we have, out of these 7, 4 or 5 of them at least, you have to have divine knowledge to be able to carry them out. And so from there he was trying to arrive at this idea of isma and infallibility in an Imam. A person who is to succeed the Holy Prophet in his responsibilities other than receiving revelation he has to be infallible, or else he won't be able to uphold these responsibilities. Okay, so if that's the case, that means that, okay, whoever is ma'soom is going to be an imam no matter what. He says, no. There's two conditions. Number one, since he's going to be infallible, or has to be infallible, it's not like he just becomes imam just like that. He has to be identified by a prophet or a previous imam. Or else, how do we know who bears the infallibility during their time? And number two, which is very important also, and we have a hadith for as well, that look, you cannot be the imam of the people if the people themselves don't want to take you as their imam. This is also important. The hadith says, La ra'ya, or it might be a saying, I'm not sure. He doesn't specify. La ra'ya liman la yuta'. You can't have a say in things when people aren't going to obey you to begin with. So Ali ibn Abi Talib, yes, he's our imam, but he didn't have power for 25 years. So at the end of the day, is he actively an imam in that sense of, being able to fulfill every responsibility? Was he the one who would send armies out to, protect the borders of Islam and so on? He wasn't. So he was an imam in one sense, but in another sense, since the people's support was not there, that imamate wasn't activated, so to speak, until he actually took the reins of power. Yes. So these are the conditions for a person's imamate to actually manifest, and for whatever potential of imamate they have to be actualized. And we have to understand that as well, and that's something that we believe did not happen for 25 years, at least for Ali ibn Abi Talib. And he says the problem was that these people, when the Prophet appointed Imam Ali, they felt that, okay, they also have a say in this matter. And so they chose somebody else. And as I said, there's a lot of stuff to talk about here. This is where, of course, the major differences of different schools of thought in Islam lie. So we have to understand that. So we've discussed infallibility and the reason why a prophet has to be infallible. If you remember, we talked about it before, that there is intellectual rationale behind why a prophet has to be infallible. Ayatollah Subhani in article number 92, he made it clear to us and reminded us that the same reasoning, intellectual reasoning, holds for an imam that holds for a prophet being infallible, having to be infallible. But at the same time, he clarifies, and he makes it clear that, look, infallibility does not mean prophethood either. We have to understand that. We have to remember that. Then he began in article number 92. This is where we left off last week. After that introduction in article 92, we get to the meat of the article, where he actually says, okay, so we have the intellectual rationale. We've already discussed that in prophethood. But in addition to that, we have textual proof and reasoning as well. Three verses and hadiths that he discusses here for why an imam also is going to be infallible. This is something to understand, that in addition to intellectual reasoning, we also have textual proof for why an imam has to be an imam. Here, he doesn't go into too much detail. He shares three of those, and that's what we're going to only do. But as I've said before, there are tons of books written on these topics. Right? Each of these verses has a lot of discussion, lots of back and forth. It's going to take hard work to use these verses to prove the point of infallibility. But let's get to it. Let's see what he says. The first one is the verse of Tathir. The verse of Tathir says, the famous verse 33, chapter 33, verse 33, إِنَّمَا يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ لِيُذْهِبَ عَنْكُمُ الرِّجْسَ أَهْلَ الْبَيْتِ وَيُطَهِّرَكُمْ تَطْهِيرًا. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills to remove rijs from you, O household of the Prophet, and to purify you a purification. He says, look, this verse, for it to yield the result of and conclusion of infallibility for Imams and the AhlulBayt, it's going to take some proving. It's going to take us, first of all, we have to prove that here rijs and impurity in the verse means all forms of impurity, all forms of darkness, which will also encompass ignorance. Yes, it will encompass sin. It will encompass any form of impurity, any form of bad, any form of darkness. Alright, so that's number one. Number two, it says Allah wills. We have to prove, if we're going to use this verse to prove infallibility, we have to be able to prove that when the verse says Allah, verily Allah wills to purify you from all impurities, wills here is a takwini, willing, not a tashri'i, willing. We've talked about this term before, just to remind all of us. It's sometimes Allah wills something and commands us to live up to it, like performing prayer, establishing prayer. That is a command. Yes, it's a command that we also can have a say in when it comes to fulfilling it or not. It's up to us. Those are tashri'i commands, commands of the sharia. Okay, but then there are some takwini commands. And when God is creating in the world and realm of cause and effect, when God wills something in this context, He just says be and it is. Yes? It's not that that thing now has a choice whether to live up to it or not. This is takwini command, when He says be. And as I've said before, He doesn't even have to word it and verbalize it. He'll just will it. Here the Quran, when it says when He wants something to happen, He says be. This is metaphorical, not that He actually has to say the word be. Like these magicians, they have to wave their magical wand or something, or say a certain line, abracadabra, for something to happen. No, it's not like that. Be, kun fayakun, be and it is not like abracadabra. Be is just symbolizing the fact that God wills something, and it happens. Yes. So here, we have to be able to prove that when God in this verse says, God wills or has willed to purify you, what is meant by here by willing and wanting it from us, or from the AhlulBayt, not that He is saying it to them in a way like He would tell them to perform prayer where they have a choice or not. No, this is something that He's actually exercising right now. He is doing. He's exercising His will. His will here equals His action. God has actually, when He says, verily Allah wills to purify you, it means God has purified you. So to use this verse, there are a few points here that have to be, first taken care of, and then the verse will prove the point that He's after, He says. So what were they again? One, to prove that rich means all impurities and all darkness. Number two, that His willing here is a takwini willing, meaning that He does it. Willing it here means He does it. And number three, which the Ayatollah Subhani has not brought in the book, but it's important as well, that there is a discussion here who AhlulBayt exactly refers to. Because this verse has come in the context of the verses that are addressing the wives of the Prophet. And so there's a discussion here as well. Does AhlulBayt here in this context refer to just the wives of the Prophet? Or does it refer to, no, those special descendants of the Holy Prophet that are infallible? There's a whole discussion there as well. Someone might look at the context of the verses and it's very clear to them that, okay, this verse is talking about the wives of the Prophet. But the Shia school of thought and their scholars also has very strong reasons to prove that, no, it's not that this verse is talking to the wives of the Prophet. It's talking about the progeny of the Prophet, the descendants of the Prophet, the good ones of them, of course, the infallible ones of them. One of the reasons they'll say is, why is it the Holy Prophet would recite this verse for like 6 months? Every day when he would knock on the door of Fatima al-Zahra and Ali ibn Abi Talib to remind them of the Fajr Salat. Not that they were sleeping or anything like that, but he would come to their door and say, إِنَّمَا يُرِيدُ اللَّهِ لِيُذْهِبَ عَنْكُمُ الرِّجْسَ أَهْلَ الْبَيْتِ وَيُطَهِّرَكُمْ تَطْهِيرًا. He would keep reciting this verse. On different occasions, many occasions for 6 months, he would do that. Okay, so if this means the wives of the Prophet, why is he reciting it? At the door of AhlulBayt, at the door of Ali alayhi salam and Fatima Zahra alayha salam. Alright. So anyway, that's one thing. There's other things too. I don't want to get into that. As I've said, there's a lot to talk about when it comes to these verses and in these types of hadiths. Okay. He says, okay, look, and I don't know why he says this here. I don't think he should, but technically he doesn't have to. But it's a good reminder that, look, when God says that I have willed for you to be purified from all impurities, this does not mean jabr. This does not mean that they are forced to be good now. Still, things are in their hands. They are by their choice. Yes? But God has given them a certain cognition of things where they just can't, they just won't do it because they are in love with Allah so much. And they have an understanding of how bad and evil sins are that they'll stay away from them because of that. But that's their own choice at the end of the day. That's the first verse he uses. Second verse that he uses is, hadith that he uses here. The first one was a verse. The second reasoning that he brings for how Imams also, not just prophets, but Imams are also infallible is Hadith al-Thaqalain that we covered a few weeks ago. Inni tarikun fikum al-Thaqalain. We all know that this hadith was said by the Prophet. Sunni and Shia agree on this one. And the wording, some parts of the hadith might be different, but all in all, we all know that the Prophet did say this on maybe even multiple occasions, that I am leaving behind me two weighty things: the Book of Allah and my progeny, my descent, my family. He says this hadith, in addition to proving that the Prophet did appoint a successor or had a successor, it also proves to us that this successor has to be infallible. They can't not be infallible. Why? Because it puts the Thaqalain next to each other. What's for sure is that the Quran is free of and devoid of all error, of any darkness whatsoever. The Quran refers to itself as Nur, right? And so, if there's no darkness in it, and there's no batil in it, لا يأتيه الباطل من بين يديه ولا من خلفه, that when the Quran tells us that no batil is entering this Quran, not from the front, not from the back, nowhere. When it tells us this, and then puts AhlulBayt next to this Quran and says, I'm leaving behind two weighty things, what does that imply? That implies that just like the Quran is up there, the AhlulBayt are up there as well. There's no darkness, there's no batil, there's no falsehood there either. There's no error and anything like that. Okay? In addition to this argument from this hadith, there's two more things that he brings here as well. He says, look, also the fact that this hadith says, مَا إِن تَمَسَّكْتُمْ بِهِمَا لَن تَضِلُّوا أَبَدًا, that as long as you cling on to these two weighty things, you will never be misguided. Which is very clear. This is very clear in what he's saying about infallibility. If someone is not infallible, you can't make a statement like that. That, listen people, follow this person no matter what, and as long as you follow them, you'll never be misguided. That's not a true statement to make unless that person is infallible. The thing is, as I said before, a few sessions ago when we were covering Hadith al-Thaqalain, is that, look, we have to understand, this part of the Hadith doesn't come in all of the versions of the Hadith, especially in the Sunni books. That ma in tamassaktum bihima. It does come in some Sunni books, but they're not the first-hand ones like Sahih Muslim and the likes of that. You'll find it, for example, in Al-Mustadrak of An-Nisaburi, things like that. And those are not, they're not seen as first tier versus the Sahihain or the Masanid of the Musnads of the Sunni school. Alright, so that's the second proof he brings here. Once again, he's keeping things very concise. Number 3, the hadith of Safina, the ark, that we also covered a few weeks ago. That the Prophet said that the example of my AhlulBayt is that of the ark of Noah. Either you're on the ark and you survive, or you're off the ark, you dead, man. So, if the AhlulBayt are like that, that means that either you follow them, and you're with them, and you're saved, or if not, then you drown. You drown meaning your akhirah in the afterlife. You're going to be ending up in the hellfire. So he says, if this is the case, also it's very clear that this statement, this claim, can only be made if everything they say or do is in line with truth and haqiqah and haqq. So these are the 3 he brings. Just in passing, because it's related to this concept of imamah. Yes, he brings these textual proofs also that, look, if we're talking about imams, if we're talking about how the Prophet has to appoint imams after him, these imams also have to be infallible. Okay, moving on. He says, article number 93, he says there's 2 ways to identify an imam. 1, a prophet tells you. 2, Imam tells you, obviously. If there's no way to find out except through the divine appointment, then those who are connected to the divine will know who is to follow, who is bearing and carrying that infallibility and in imamah. Alright. He says, look, we have 12 Imams. These are their names. And he lists them. I'm not going to go through their names. But the reason for 12 now. Okay, so how far did we get? We went, first of all, the Prophet had to appoint someone after him. We believe it was Ali ibn Abi Talib. Then after that, if the Prophet's going to appoint anyone, if anyone's going to be an Imam after the Prophet had certain responsibilities. Those responsibilities now are carried on to the one to succeed him. And to do that, and to be able to live up to all those responsibilities, they have to be infallible. Number 2. Number 3, now he's talking about the number of these Imams. They're 12. What's your reason for it? Is there intellectual reasoning and rationale that is 12? Nope. If Allah had not told us, if the Imams had not told us, and the Prophet had not told us, we wouldn't have known it was 12. It can be 14, it can be 20, it can be 100 infallible Imams. But we have textual reasons and proof for that they're going to be 12. Now here he tries to give it a Sunni touch as well. And so he brings a hadith that we find in Sunni sources as well. And yes, it's accepted by all. That the Prophet said, لا يزال الدين منيعا إلى 12 خليفة. Or that he said, لا يزال الإسلام عزيزا إلى 12 خليفة. What does that mean? That means that the deen and religion shall have honor and dignity and will keep its head high and will persist and survive until 12 Khalifahs come. For the duration of the life of these 12 Khalifahs, Islam will be a great religion. But the problem, as you can see, brothers and sisters, the Prophet in these hadiths that exist in Sunni and Shi'i sources, the Prophet has not identified who these 12 are. That's the thing though. So what's for sure is, if you're going to have Khalifahs, if you're going to believe in Khalifahs, or you're going to believe in Imams, the ones that matter are 12. And that's not going to be 10, it's not going to be 13 or anything like that. So, Atul Subhani, he goes through the ones that we believe in to be the 12. Yes? Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, Hassan ibn Ali, Husayn ibn Ali, Ali ibn al-Husayn, Muhammad ibn Ali, Ja'far ibn Muhammad, Musa ibn Ja'far, Ali ibn Musa, Muhammad ibn Ali, Ali ibn Muhammad, Hassan ibn Ali, which is the 11th Imam, and the 12th Imam. Okay, who are they in the Sunni school then? That's the question. I'm just saying this on the side to satisfy your curiosity, if any of you are curious out there listening to this. Who are these 12 in the Sunni school of thought? Well, there's different ideas here and different postulations. I'll just read to you what Ibn Taymiyyah says, which he does not, of course, represent the Sunni school of thought in its entirety at all. But in this day and age, he is being introduced and kind of shoved down the throat of the people as Shaykh al-Islam, the one who represents the Sunni school of thought and the mainstream Sunni school of thought today. But when you look into it, you find that no, he's not mainstream, but of course he will be respected by a lot of people out there. So what does he say? I just want to read to you from his book, Minhajus Sunnah. If I can just find it, hopefully. Yes, he says, وَهَكَذَا كَانْ فَكَانَ الْخُلَفَاءُ أَبُو بَكْرَ وَعُمَرْ وَعُثْمَانْ وَعَلِي. That the Khulafa were these four, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali. ثُمَّ تَوَلَّى مَنْ اجْتَمَعَ النَّاسُ عَلَيْهِ وَصَارَ لَهُ عِزٌّ وَمَنْعَةٌ. Then after these four, there were others that the whole Muslim nation agreed on and unanimously chose. اجتمع الناس عليه, which is, of course, the Shia school definitely doesn't believe in this. And history does not attest to this either. Who says that everyone agreed on the ones who came after the first four Khalifahs? Right? Even the first four, the Shia school will contest that it was not unanimously accepted by everyone. But let's just assume the first four. But look at who we have here after the four. And he is listing them, and in the end he concludes that these are the 12 Imams, or Khalifahs, that the Hadith is talking about. Who are they? Muawiyah. Wabnuhu Yazid. Muawiyah was the fifth. Yazid is the sixth. That is going to be the one who brings honor and izzah to Islam. Brothers and sisters, I want you to understand what's going on here. Yazid is seen as one of the 12 Khalifahs in Ibn Taymiyyah's eyes. I don't think lots of Sunni brothers and sisters like Yazid or respect him because of all forget about Ashura and what happened there. That itself is enough. But some people question it. They say, Yazid was not involved in the killing of Imam Hussein directly. Ubaidullah bin Ziyad did things on his own, and it's his fault. Okay, fine, whatever. Let's not even talk about that. Although we totally disagree with that, and we have our reasons to be against that. And if lots of Sunni brothers and sisters out there also do not have respect for Yazid, because in the end they understand that it was because of him that Al-Hussein ﷺ got killed. But let's just assume that's not the case. What about the 3-day massacre that happened in Medina, a year or two after Ashura took place? What about the catapulting and setting ablaze of the Kaaba and Masjid al-Haram during the time of Yazid? It's because of these things that a big number of our Sunni brothers and sisters do not respect Yazid. Yet we find here that Ibn Taymiyyah brings Yazid as the sixth of those 12 great Khalifahs. Then who after him? Abdul Malik, and then his 4 children, وَبَيْنَهُمْ Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. Alright, so the 12 are there in the hadith. They've been mentioned by number, but not by name. The Shia school of thought will have hadiths where the Prophet actually mentioned them by name as well. But what's important here is that we're going through Shia Imamiyyah doctrine. Yes? And this is what the Shia believes in, that they are 12, and these 12 are who? The ones that I mentioned the names of. Article number 94 talks about how love of this family and progeny of the Holy Prophet is one of those things that every Muslim agrees on, based on the Quran. Surah Shura, verse 27. It doesn't matter if you follow the Imams as your Imams and the ones that you look at as infallible, or no, you look at them as fallible beings, as some of the Sunni brothers and sisters look at, or the majority look at, and mainstream Sunni Islam looks at. It doesn't matter if you look at them as infallible or just normal people who are descendants of the Holy Prophet. What's for sure is that there has to be love of them. This is important. قُلْ لَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ أَجْرًا إِلَّا الْمَوَدَّةَ فِي الْقُرْبَى, that the Holy Prophet said in this verse of the Quran is telling the Prophet to say, actually, O Prophet, tell these people, I don't want anything as compensation for what I'm doing of delivering the message of God to you. This is not something our Prophet said. Previous prophets said the same thing as well. When you look in the Quran, they say this, وَلَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ أَجْرٍ إِنْ أَجْرِيَ إِلَّا عَلَى اللَّهِ, that my ajr, my reward, my compensation, well, the word compensation is not good. My reward is in Allah's hands. I don't ask you for anything. Previous prophets said the same thing too. But it's interesting how the Holy Prophet of Islam, he says, I don't ask you for any reward, but yes, there's one thing I do ask you for. So he's different than previous prophets. Well, what is that reward that you're asking for? Well, it's not even a reward. It says it's al-mawaddata fil qurba. I want you to love my close relatives. Of course, the righteous ones of his close relatives, or else Abu Lahab was a close relative of his as well. But he is someone that the Quran has sent its la'na upon. Yes. Why is it so important to love them? He says because the least is that you take them as your role models. You want to be like them. Yes? You cannot take someone as your role model when you dislike them. Now I want to read the rest of this article off of the book, what he says. Article 94. He says, in certain mutawatir hadiths, meaning hadiths that have reached us by numerous people that make that for us push us to reach total conviction that that hadith is authentic. We've talked about tawatur before, brothers and sisters. In certain mutawatir hadiths, it is related that love of the Prophet's AhlulBayt is a sign of faith, and enmity towards them a sign of faithlessness and hypocrisy. Whoso loves them loves the Prophet and God, and whoso opposes them opposes God and His Prophet. In principle, loving the family of the Prophet is one of the obligations of the faith of Islam, about which there is no doubt or confusion. This is the important part. Like when we say it's unanimously accepted, meaning like if you don't have it, you might be outside the fold of Islam even. And all Muslims are at one as regards this principle, except for one group known as the Nawasib, who are, for this very reason, regarded as having left the faith of Islam. See, this is very important. There were some people, in the past especially, maybe there still exist today, but they're much, much less in number. But they were there in the past who would seek closeness to God through disliking the family of the Holy Prophet. And these were people of Bani Umayyah, people who adhered to that version of Islam of Bani Umayyah. So other than that, this is something that everyone understands, everyone accepts. Love of the AhlulBayt. Alright, so we're done with that section of Imamah. And finally, we move on to article number 95. Articles 95 and onwards have to do with the 12th Imam in particular. Everything that could have been said that was related to all of these Imams as a whole was said by him so far. Of course, in a concise manner. Their infallibility, their number, all that stuff. But now he singles out the 12th Imam because the 12th Imam is a little different than the rest of the Imams. This 12th Imam is different in the sense of how he's still alive today, according to the Shia school of thought, and that he is fulfilling certain responsibilities, and that there are certain questions and challenges put forth regarding him, his existence, and so on and so forth. So Ayatollah Subhani wants to address some of this as well. He keeps it, once again, very concise. There's room for a 20-hour course on the 12th Imam alone, and all the things that have to do with this concept and this topic. Inshallah, one day, Mizan will have that ready, and we can go around and share that information with our brothers and sisters across this part of the world. Now, Article 95 starts with this. It talks about how everyone in Islam believes that, and it's ijma', consensus, that there will be a final savior who will come to save mankind from all the trouble it's gotten into. And of course, as you all know, this concept, this messianism, is not just in Islam, it's in other faiths as well. You'll find it in Christianity, you'll find it in Judaism, you might even find it in non-Abrahamic faiths as well. Alright, what do we have here? Well, he says we have 657 hadiths regarding this final savior. Sunni, Shia, everyone believes in him for sure, without a doubt. You can go on YouTube right now, you can Google it, you can YouTube it, you'll find lectures on it from Shi'i scholars, Sunni scholars, everywhere. That this 12th Imam, or this final, let's not call him 12th Imam here, this final savior is going to come one day. He brings a hadith by Ahmad bin Hanbal in his Musnad, in his most prominent book of hadith, where he says, the Prophet said, لو لم يبق من الدنيا إلا يوم واحد لطول الله ذلك اليوم حتى يخرج رجل من ولدي فيملأها عدلا وقسطا كما ملئت ظلما وجورا. Alright, what does that mean? That means if there was only one day left for this earth, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would lengthen and prolong it so much so that a man from his progeny, yes, comes and fills the world with justice the same way it has been filled with injustice and transgression. Yeah, so that's one hadith he brings here. There's a lot, as I said, he says 657 hadiths. Well, what do these 657 hadiths even say? What do they talk about? What are the themes you find in these hadiths? Article number 96 gives us a list of 12. He categorizes them into 12 categories. These hadiths about Imam Mahdi, the Savior, the one to come, the Messiah, if you want to call him that as well. Islam doesn't call him that, but some other faiths might refer to the final Savior as the Messiah. Okay. He says 389 hadiths of them. We have 389 hadiths. Okay, well, let me make a little correction. When I said 657 hadiths, yes, when he says we have 657 hadiths, I guess he's talking about 657 hadiths that speak about the existence of the Imam itself, not attributes of it or of him. He says, according to the estimates of the scholars, there are 657 hadiths on this subject. But then when he breaks it down, yes, and he gives 12 categories, he categorizes the hadiths into 12 categories, the sum of the numbers he gives is, of course, more than 657, so I don't know how that adds up. But anyway, let me just read off of this for you. He says, we have 389 hadiths that tell us that he, the 12th Imam, the Savior, is going to be from the AhlulBayt of the Prophet. 214 hadiths that he's going to be the son of and from the descendants of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. 192 that say of the children of Fatimah al-Zahra alayhi salam. 148 that say he's going to be the 9th of the children of Imam Hussein, the 9th generation, let's call it. 185 that say he's going to be of the children of Zayn al-Abidin, Ali ibn al-Hussein alayhi salam. 146 that he's going to be the son of Imam Hassan al-Askari alayhi salam. 136 that say he's the 12th Imam of the Imams of AhlulBayt. 214 hadiths speak of his birth, it says. 318 hadiths talk about how his life is going to be long. 91 hadiths that is his occultation is going to be very long. 27 hadiths that Islam will overtake the world after he returns. 132 hadiths that the world will be filled with justice after he returns. Okay. So as I said, and as Ayatollah Subhani says, this is something everyone agrees on. Shia Sunnah. Everybody. So does that mean that we agree on everything in this regarding this concept? He says, nope. We agree on the concept itself, but the details, there is big differences of opinion. Most importantly, the one that says, the belief that goes that the 12th Imam is alive today. He was born in 255 after Hijrah and has been alive till today, but he's in occultation. We don't have access to him. That's what the Shia school believes. And they have their reasons for it. He doesn't get into the reasons. The mainstream Sunni school believes that no, he's not born yet. He will be born later and he will grow, and once he reaches the right age, he will come and take over and fill the world with justice. Okay, so there is a big difference here between the two schools of thought. Article 97. Man, let's see if we can finish today this whole chapter of Imamah. Article 95 says that it is beyond the scope of this book to speak in detail of each of the 12 Imams. Oh, excuse me, Article 97 I said. Yes, Article 97. From the Quranic point of view, there are two types of, now here the translation says saints. There are two types of saints of God and chosen ones of God, let's say. Awliya. The outwardly manifest wali and chosen one, or saint, who is known by the people, and the saint who is hidden from view, unknown by people, even though he lives among them and is aware of them. In Surah Al-Kahf, both types of saints are mentioned in the same place. One was Musa ibn Imran, and the other is Khidr. Yes, if you go to those verses of Surah Al-Kahf, which are, I don't know if he mentions it here. Yeah, Surah Kahf, verses 65 to 66. It says, you'll find there both types have been mentioned in one story. Prophet Musa and Prophet Khidr. Prophet Musa was ordered by God to go and be with one of God's chosen ones. The Quran doesn't call him by his name or mention him by his name, Khidr, but we know it was him. And Prophet Musa goes to him and says, I have to learn certain things from you. And you all know the story probably. You can read about it in the tafsir books as well. What happens is Prophet Musa meets him. Okay. This saint of God was such that even Moses did not know his true identity. And it was only through God's guidance that he came to know who he really was and come to benefit from his actions, as these verses tell us. The Quran then relates the useful and beneficial actions of this saint. Yeah, the story of Prophet Khidr, what Prophet Khidr did. Making it absolutely clear that although the people did not know him, they nonetheless benefited from his influence and his holiness. The Imam of this age, meaning the 12th Imam, is akin to the companion of Moses, Prophet Khidr. Just like Prophet Khidr, no one knew him, but he was doing stuff actively. The 12th Imam also is not known right now. He is amongst us, the Hadith tells us. We'll see him maybe, but we might not even, we definitely will not identify him as the Imam. But he's getting stuff done. Now, what those things are, brothers and sisters, is beyond the scope of our discussions here. The Imam of this age is akin to the companion of Moses, namely Prophet Khidr, being unknown even while being a source of beneficence for the Ummah and the people. Thus, the occultation of the 12th Imam does not imply any separation from the community, and it shouldn't. Rather, he is described in a hadith related from the AhlulBayt as being like the sun hidden behind a cloud. The sun sometimes is behind the clouds, like today where we are. The clouds were covering the sun. Yet, the sun still is benefiting the earth. Just because the sun can't be seen by our eyes doesn't mean it doesn't have benefit anymore. Hadith tell us the same way the sun benefits the earth behind the clouds, and Imam in occultation is still benefiting somehow. As I said, this is in deeper books that has to be discussed. How is that? And so because of that, his existence is necessary. Like the hadith says, like the sun hidden behind a cloud, unseen by the eyes, but nonetheless bestowing light and heat upon the earth. In addition, throughout history there have been many among the pious and the pure of heart, souls worthy of being honored by him, who have been made aware of his presence and have benefited and continue to benefit from him. And through them, others have also come to receive the blessings of this Imam. This is like something he's pointing to here that's, not very relevant to our discussion right now, but he says, look, people have also met him. Now, those who don't believe in the 12th Imam will maybe, tell us that that person thinks they might have met him, but it's just an illusion. Some even might mock this notion. So, it's not something relevant, I think, personally, to this discussion that we're having right now. He just puts it there as like a cherry on top of the icing. Or else, yeah. Article number 98. He makes a point that, look, we don't have access to him anymore, right? But don't worry, people, his representatives are accessible. Now, during his minor occultation, as you all know, mainstream Shia believes that he had 4 representatives who were in direct contact with him. But after the minor occultation ended, and the major occultation began al-ghaybat al-kubra, what happens is the Imam now expects the people not to look for a specific representative that is in direct contact with the Imam. No, people who have learned Islam, learned the Hadiths of the Imams, learned the Quran properly and the sayings of the Prophet properly, thus having a grasp of Islam and Islamic teachings, the Imam expects the people to go to them now at least. So they're also seen as representatives, but not in direct contact with the Imam, but through the sayings of the Imams being in contact with him. Okay. So article number 98 says, people, don't worry, don't fret. Although the Imam is not accessible, but 11 Imams came before him who taught Islam, and their sayings are there. The Quran is there. The sayings of the Holy Prophet are there. Go to them now. At least they're accessible. That's article number 98. Number 99 talks about how we won't ever be able to understand the entire wisdom behind the occultation, and why an Imam has to go into occultation. Number one. Point number one. Point number two that he makes is that people, this idea and notion of an Imam or a Prophet being inaccessible is not something peculiar to the 12th Imam. This has been there in previous nations as well. He says Prophet Musa ibn Imran, Prophet Musa, Moses alayhi salam, for 40 days left his people on their own. Yes? I don't like to use it to word it like that, left them on their own, but he wasn't there with them, he was not accessible by them. Prophet Isa alayhi salam, he went into hiding as well, and he was not accessible when they were trying to kill him. Surah Nisa, verse 158. Prophet Yunus alayhi salam, he went away from his people for a while. Surah Safat, verse 140 talks about that. So this idea and notion of occultation or inaccessibility is there in previous nations as well. It's not something that just happened with the 12th Imam, he says. That's another point. A third point he makes here is in article number 99 is, just because we cannot understand all the reasoning behind it, all the wisdom behind it, doesn't mean that now we deny it. This is so important. This is a rule that applies not to just this topic, but to any topic. There are some people who can't understand why there is suffering and evil in this world. What do they get out of this? What they get out of it is that there must be no God. And they question and undermine the whole existence of God because they can't find the answer to their questions. Just because a person can't find the answers to their questions doesn't mean they should question the whole institution now and the whole system either. That's another point he reminds us of as well. Maybe it's I was going to read off of the book, but I don't think it's necessary. I think it's pretty clear. And finally, in article number 99, he makes this point and drives this point home that people, if there's a reason for why he's in occultation, then until that reason is still there, he will not come out of that occultation either. And so the world has to be ready for his return as well. Once again, this is a notion that you will find in other faiths as well. It's not just Islam. That he will return when the time is right, when the reason for him to be in occultation no longer exists. And now we have some hadiths that have mentioned some of those reasons, but it's not limited to them. So like for example, he brings the hadith by Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, that he says that where there will be an occultation before the return of the 12th Imam. And so the person that's with the Imam al-Baqir, asks why that is the case. Why does he have to go into occultation? The Imam replies to prevent his assassination and killing. If he is accessible, and identifiable, people will go after him. And so that's why he's going to be in occultation. This hadith doesn't say it's the only reason. We have maybe other hadiths that will tell us, he says here, that will tell us that it is to refine the people, to test the people, things like that as well. So there's many different reasons. Until those reasons have not been accomplished, he's not going to return. That's the point that he makes in the end of article number 99. Moving on to article number 100, which brings us to the 2/3 mark of this book. Alhamdulillah, we're finished 99 articles. We're at the 100th article. This book comprises of 150 articles. So we have 50 articles to go. This means we've gone 2/3 of the way. Alhamdulillah. Article number 100 kind of gives an answer to a question some people might have, that hey, if the point of an imam was to guide the people and all that kind of stuff and help the people in their religion, then what's the point of an imam that is in hiding or is in occultation, let's call it? Because ghaiba doesn't mean hiding. That's not a good equivalent for the word. He makes a good point here. He doesn't repeat what he said before of how the imam is like a sun behind the clouds and all of that. That's some deeper stuff that, requires more time to discuss. But what he says here is important as well. We have to understand. God will do His part, brothers and sisters, in sending prophets, in sending imams. If people kill these prophets and imams and they're not accessible for others, is that God's fault now? That's not God's fault. Now those people who don't have access to those prophets or imams, will God hold them accountable the same way He holds those who have access to them accountable? No, it's probably going to be different. But at the end of the day, God's not the one to blame. The imam is not the one to blame. If they are going to only be 12, 11 of them are sent, 11 of them are killed by sword, poison, whatever it is. If some of them live longer lives, but then the last 3 imams, the 9th, 10th, and 11th imam, together their lives don't add up to 100 years, and there's only going to be 12 of them, then what's God going to do with the 12th one? He's going to preserve the 12th one, even if it means that he's not identifiable for others. Very simple. Whose fault is it here? It's the people's fault. It's not God's fault or the imam's fault. This is a good point Ayatollah Subhani makes. Ayatollah Subhani in Article 99, I think he keeps it real, or excuse me, Article 100, he keeps it real, people. Article number 101 has to do with how some people will find it a little bit hard to accept and hard to digest that this imam was born in 255 AH. We are in 1441 AH. What's the difference? About 1200 years. You're telling me, someone might say, that somebody out there lives for 1200 years? Well, let's go through this article. What does Ayatollah Subhani say? Article number 101. The Imam of the time, the 12th Imam, having seen the light of day in the year 255 AH, is now over 11 centuries old. In the light of the vast power of God, accepting such a proposition is not difficult, for, in truth, those who find this idea hard to accept forget that divine power is infinite. Surah An'am verse 91 says, and they rate not God at His true worth. We don't give God enough credit. That's in layman's terms what this verse is saying. In addition to this, one should recall that in past communities there were many persons of exceedingly old age, such as Prophet Nuh, whose prophetic mission lasted for some 950 years according to the Quran, Surah Ankabut, verse 14. Indeed, if God, who is omnipotent, can keep the Prophet Jonah alive in the belly of a whale, Prophet Yunus, until the day of resurrection, Surah Safat, verses 143 to 144, can He not bestow a long life on the Imam who is His proof on earth, sustaining him through His blessings and His grace? The answer is clearly in the affirmative. Yes, so there's no reason to doubt, he says here. Once again, he keeps it concise. There's more even explanation to how the Imam can have such a long life and live such a long life. Alright, article number 101, that's what it's talking about. Article number 102 talks about when the Imam is going to return. It is very clear in the Shia school, we have hadith for this, that no one knows when the dhuhur is going to happen. No one knows. what the date is going to be. It's close or is it far? As far as we know, as far as some scholars say, we can't, it might not even be set in stone, even in God's knowledge right now, in the sense that it might have a certain date, but then because of certain circumstances, God might prolong it even more. Yeah, some scholars even say that. Right? So, but at the end of the day, in God's ultimate knowledge, it is set in stone. He knows exactly when it is going to happen, and how many times it might get put off and might be prolonged. Right? But in the end, God knows when it's going to eventually take place, of course. There's no doubt about that. But other than God, no one knows. Some might argue that even the 12th Imam himself doesn't know. Some might argue, no, he does know. That is something that there might be difference of opinion on. But God is the only one who knows for sure, 100%. If that's the case, anyone else who determines a certain date for his return, the Hadiths tell us, is lying. كَذَبَ الْوَقَّاتُونَ, the ones who give a waqt, a time, determine a time for his return, are lying, the Hadith tells us. This is what article number 102 speaks about. Let me read that to you real quick. Nobody knows the time when the Imam will appear. This, like the time appointed for the Day of Judgment, is known only to God. So this is the last article we're going to read, brothers and sisters, before I end. Therefore, one cannot believe anyone who claims to have this knowledge, or who specifies a given period within which the Imam will appear. Leaving aside the question of the precise moment of his appearance, we should note that in certain hadiths, mention is made of general signs indicating his appearance. Okay, so we do have that. These are divided into two categories, these signs, brothers and sisters. What are they? These two categories? Those that are definite and those that are indefinite. Detailed elaboration on these signs will be found in books of theology and hadith. So he doesn't get into those signs. Yes, we do have signs. And then you'll have sometimes people who will try to identify those signs with certain phenomena that are happening today in the world we live in. Yeah? But even that is not something encouraged by our grand scholars. Sometimes even little scholars will say these things. But with the grand scholars, what I've seen is that they're not in a hurry and in a rush to identify these signs with certain phenomena around us today. No, they're not. As a matter of fact, sometimes they say, no, it's not even happening yet. So close or far or whatever, brothers and sisters, it's not a bad thing to, try to identify, but in the end, we're not going to ever be 100% sure. I say this all the time to brothers and sisters out there. Instead of trying to figure out if it's close or far, the return of the Imam, try to make sure you are living your lives in a way that you are ready for your death, because death is going to happen for sure. Yes? And the Quran says it's close for all of us. 50 years, 60 years, 100 years, it's going to happen. Are we ready for that? If we're ready for that, we are ready for the return of the 12th Imam too. Close or far. As far as we know, we're not sure if it's the return of the Imam is going to happen in our time or not. If we know it's going to happen in our time, is that going to be a reason for us to be better people necessarily? It shouldn't be, brothers and sisters, because we know death is coming for sure. So let's have that at least figured out. Okay, so with that, I'm going to end it here. There is so much to talk about regarding this 12th Imam, but we're going to leave it at that because that's how far the book goes. I'm going to end here. Next week, we're going to start with the last chapter, or the last of the Usuluddin that we have, which is resurrection, and the hereafter, and the life to come, and Judgment Day, and all of that, which is referred to as Ma'ad in our books, or in the Quran, in our Hadith books, and in our theology. Ma'ad is very important. It is what gives meaning to life for us here in this world. It is what gives us something to look forward to. It is what keeps us on the right track, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of nice things to cover there as well, inshallah. Inshallah, we'll leave it for next week. I think, yes, this is our last session for October. Following this session, we'll have the November sessions. The flyer for that will go out, but it's going to be the same time, 7 o'clock, inshallah. And that'll be after daylight savings time. So Salat is going to be a lot before this, at least for where we are. So that's not going to be a worry anymore. This time around, this happened. I wasn't paying attention to that, and since I had made that announcement, I just kept it at that time. But this won't be a problem, inshallah, moving forward in November. Inshallah, till next week, keep us in your du'as. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.